Hello and welcome to the ebiketips channel. Now, if you're considering buying an e-bike, then there are lots of things to consider, and in this beginner's guide, we're going to talk you through the basics. We've got plenty of experience of e-bikes here at ebiketips. Part of my day job is to ride and review e-bikes, so I've ridden hundreds of them over the years. I'll try and answer the questions you might have in this video, but ask us anything in the comments below and we'll try and help. And if you subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon, you'll be kept up to date with all our new videos. An e-bike is a bike equipped with an electric motor and a battery designed to give you assistance when you're pedaling. Exactly what an e-bike is varies around the world, especially in terms of how powerful it can be. So for the purposes of this video, when I say e-bike, I'm talking about an EU legal pedelec bike. Pedelec just means it's not fully powered by the motor. They will only ever assist you when you're pedaling, and even then, only up to a limit of 25 kilometers per hour. If you want to go faster than that, you're on your own. E-bikes are probably the fastest growing new mode of transport on the planet, and in many countries such as Germany, the Netherlands and Denmark, they're viewed as a viable alternative to a car, particularly for urban living. In many European countries, e-bikes make up a quarter or more of all new bike sales. So why are they so popular? I've got three bikes with me here that go some way to demonstrating the various types of e-bike available and the different capabilities and benefits they offer. Obviously, there are thousands of different models available at a huge range of price points. This is just a tiny sample, but it gives you an idea of how different e-bikes can be from one another and how they can suit your riding, whatever form it might take. Firstly, we have a city bike in the middle here. This is a cheap one. It's an e-scoot Wayfarer, which retails for £899. Now, this is probably the most common and popular style of bike, and for good reason. A city bike offers you a bit of everything. It's simple to ride. This drop top tube here means it's easier to get on and off in town. It's got a rear rack here that can carry pannier bags for your shopping. And you can see that it's fully kitted out with mud guards and lights for riding in all weathers. It's a great style of bike for leisure rides too. Secondly, we have a cargo bike. This is the Turn GSD, which starts at £4,499. Now, this spec with the double battery is actually over £5,000. Now, that's a lot of money, but this is probably our favourite e-bike here at ebiketips, and it's a bike that can easily replace a car for many people. So our GSD here has a bench seat for a grown-up passenger. We use it to shoot all the riding shots you'll see in this video, but you can also spec big panniers here to swallow your shopping. It'll take two kids in child seats too. This design is called a long tail. Clues in the name there, really. The other common design is a long john, where the load area is at the front between the rider and the front wheel. Finally, as a demonstration of just how much e-bikes have evolved, we have the Cannondale Super 6 Evo Neo 3. Now, this will cost you £3,800 in this build, and if you saw it out on the roads, you probably wouldn't even clock it's an e-bike. The battery is in the down tube, the motor is in the rear hub. The only real giveaway is this little button here on the top tube that controls the motor. This is a really light bike too. The motor system only adds about 3.5 kilos to the bike's overall weight. This is more of a bike for enthusiast cyclists. So why get an e-bike? Well, the beauty of an e-bike is that it offers all the versatility and advantages that a traditional bicycle enjoys over other forms of transport. They're easy to use. You don't need a license, you don't need to pay tax or insurance, there are no emissions, the running costs are low, they're easy and they're free to park, and they can access parts of cities that motor vehicles can't. Now, on top of all of that, you get the help of a motor. Hills are less of an issue, and because you're not working as hard, you can usually just wear your normal clothes rather than having to change. For short city journeys of up to 5 miles, a bike is usually the most efficient and direct form of transport. I mean, it can literally take you from door to door. And once you've factored in getting to and from the station or parking your car, it's often quicker for much longer journeys too. Now, the added power of an e-bike adds a whole new dimension to what you can do on the bike. It increases the range you can travel, and it also makes the journey easier. It's the smart alternative to a car, or at least a second car, and the extra power also boosts the e-bike's load lugging ability. I mean, even a normal city bike like this e-scoot can be kitted out with panniers for carrying groceries and shopping. If you want to carry even more, then one particular category of bike that has really made a splash in recent years is the e-cargo bike. I mean, like this Turn, think of it as a van on two wheels. A bike like this will swallow your whole weekly family shop and get it and you home without breaking a sweat. Or you can carry two kids to school, or you can give a mate a lift down the pub Cargo bikes have made such an impact that supermarkets and courier companies are increasingly using fleets of them for their last mile deliveries in cities across the country. Those are just some of the benefits to you, but e-bikes also bring benefits to the planet and other people. From an environmental perspective, any trip that you swap from a car to an e-bike is cutting emissions, it's freeing up road space, and it's lessening the pressure on infrastructure that's already overcrowded. Now, the overall carbon footprint of an e-bike is also much, much lower than that of a car and even an electric car. And of course, an e-bike is much cheaper to buy than a car. Even a top-end e-bike like this Turn is a quarter of the price of a new electric car. E-bikes are a form of low-emission transport that's well within the price range of a lot more people. Battery and motor technology is developing all the time too. 10 years ago, batteries were twice the weight of a modern lithium-ion pack like this one here, and they lasted half as long. Motors also get lighter with every new version that comes out too, and more powerful. What makes an e-bike is the motor system. Now, e-bike motors can be built into either the wheels or the frame, and we've got both types here. Hub motors aren't exclusively found on cheaper bikes. After all, this Cannondale is pretty spendy, but they are what you'll see on any bike below about £1,500. Mid motors like this are more complicated to make, and they require a dedicated frame design. You can't just squeeze them into a standard frame. For those reasons, mid motors dominate the premium end of the market. Front hub motors are the cheapest to produce because they don't have to deal with any of the drive forces from the chain, so they can be made a bit more cheaply. So does it matter what kind of motor you get? Well, they all work. All other things being equal, a mid motor is usually best for a number of reasons. Firstly, they're generally better at producing power at low speeds. So a hub motor here has to spin at whatever speed you're traveling, and at low speeds they can lack power. Because of your bike's gears, a mid motor can spin much more quickly at a slow moving speed. So they tend to be better when it's hilly, and it also makes them more efficient too. Also, because they're directly connected to the cranks, mid motors can instantly add power when it's needed. Some rear hub motors do that too, but most use a sensor on the cranks, which takes a little while, a second or two, to realise you're moving. Mid motors also usually use a torque sensor, which detects how much effort you're putting in and adds power accordingly. Hub motors generally just sensing whether the pedals are turning, so it's a bit more on and off. That makes those systems a bit less efficient, and also they generally don't feel as natural. Lastly, having the weight of the motor in the centre of the bike down here and low is much better for the balance of the bike. It also means there's no extra work to do to remove a wheel if you get a puncture, as both wheels are just standard bike wheels. Bosch motors like the one in this Turn and Shimano motors dominate the mid-motor market. There's Bros and Yamaha and Transex and Bafang and Mahler. They also make good systems. Bafang and Mahler with the e-bike motion system in the Cannondale are the biggest names in the hub motor world too, along with Suntour. But there are lots of decent unbranded hub motors out there on cheaper bikes. Nearly every e-bike you can buy will have multiple levels of assistance, because if you're spinning around on the flat, you don't need as much help as when you're grinding up a hill. Now, this Cannondale has 3 assistance modes, the Turn has 4, and the e-scoot has 5. More isn't necessarily better. Most cheaper e-bikes have loads. We've seen as many as 10. But unless you can tell the difference between them, there's not much point. 3 or 4 is plenty, and that's what all the best motor systems have. Obviously, the higher you set the assistance, the more of the battery you'll use. Lots of e-bikes also have a walk mode, that means you don't need to push the bike along yourself, which is especially useful if you need to get up a ramp, for example. Choosing your assist level helps control the bike's range, but it also gives you the choice of just how much effort you want to put in. So if you're riding for exercise, but you just want a bit of help on the hills or to go further, you can use a low setting. If you want the bike to do all the work, you can just dial it up to maximum. Okay, onto the battery. The battery on your e-bike will be made from lithium-ion cells. Now, lithium-ion batteries are everywhere, from mobile phones to Tesla trucks, so it's no surprise to find them powering e-bikes. More expensive e-bikes will generally have bigger batteries, although not always. Some lightweight bikes, like this Cannondale, have smaller batteries so that they can be hidden from view inside the frame. Now, if it's not inside the bike, the battery is typically mounted on the frame, like this, or in a custom-made rear rack. Battery capacity is measured in watt-hours or amp-hours. Watt-hours is the better measure because it's comparable across all bikes, no matter what voltage system they're using. It's easy to switch between the two. Just multiply the amp-hour capacity with the bike's voltage. So A 10 amp hour battery on a 36 volt bike is a 360 watt hour battery. Capacities vary from 100 watt hours for super light add-on systems to 1000 watt hours and more. This Tern GSD has two 500 watt hour batteries. Many manufacturers will offer battery upgrade options. Now, lithium-ion batteries degrade over time, so they hold less charge as they age. The quality of a battery does make a difference there, so look for a reputable named battery manufacturer in the specs, such as Sony, Samsung or Panasonic, and make sure the warranty on your e-bike covers the battery for at least 2 years. Now, if there's a problem with the battery, you'll almost certainly discover it in that time. The battery can usually be removed for charging, although sometimes, like this Cannondale, it's fully internal. Now, in a cold climate like we have in the UK, it's a good idea to charge the battery inside if you can, as charging the battery when it's cold can damage it. If you're careful though, they'll last for ages. Lithium-ion batteries are typically rated to last from 500 to 800 full charge cycles. That's about 3 years of weekday commuting. Those are the minimums. In practice, a battery life of many more years than that is pretty normal. A full charge typically takes between 2.5 and 8 hours, depending on the manufacturer, the battery capacity, and the power of the charger. Most people will just charge the battery overnight, although if you have a long commute and you're concerned about range, having a second charger at the office is a really good idea. How far an e-bike will go on one charge of the battery is probably one of the most important things you'll want to know. If your commute involves a big hill, for example, you don't want to run out of juice halfway up it. Without power, an e-bike is just a heavy bike, and that's no fun on a steep climb. A longer range usually means a bigger battery, and that means more cost and more weight. Now, if you're only going to do a 5-mile commute, you don't need a 50-mile range. But nevertheless, you should buy a bike with a higher range than you need because, like we've said before, the battery loses capacity as it ages, so the range will drop. The range you get in practice will depend on how much you weigh, the assist level you choose, the terrain you ride, how fast you go. You'll go further on a charge in the flatlands of Cambridge, for example, than the hills of Sheffield, but you might have more need for an e-bike in the hills anyway. Even the weather can have a big effect on the range. Lithium-ion batteries are much more efficient when it's warm than when it's freezing out. A good rule of thumb for range is to divide the battery capacity in watt hours by 12, and that will give you an idea of the minimum range in kilometres. So if you use full assist all the time, a 500 watt hour battery might last for just over 40 kilometres. If you're more sparing with the motor power, then obviously you'll go further. Cheaper bikes tend to have poorer battery management, so you'll see the power drop off as the battery empties, and then you'll often see the battery state on the display affected by what you're doing too. So head up a big hill and it will go down, and then ease off on the flat and it will go up again. The more you spend, the better the experience. Bosch motors like the one on this Tern feel basically the same whether they're on 5 bars or 1 bar of battery, and the final bar lasts a similar amount of time to the first one. All of that means less range anxiety. What about the costs? Well, e-bikes are not cheap, even compared with unassisted bikes. So something like this e-scoot at £899 is at the bottom end of bikes we'd actually recommend. Below this, there tend to be too many compromisers and the bikes aren't that much fun to ride. Good mid-motorbikes start at around the £2,000 mark, and the most expensive bikes, they're well into 5 figures. It can be a big investment, so it's worth taking your time, and we definitely recommend seeing your local independent bike shop or electric bike retailer to get a really good feel for what you need. Say you're looking at a £2,000 bike, that sounds like a lot of money. But is it? I mean, a London Zone 1 to 3 travel card costs over £1,700 a year, and if you live in any other city in the UK, a comparable public transport pass is going to be in the same ballpark. If you're currently driving to work, then just the cost of insuring, taxing, MOTing and fueling your car will probably be more than that, even before you start to take into account parking, wear and tear, depreciation. Even a high-end e-bike starts to look pretty competitive. Like we've said before, the cost of the electricity really is tiny, and a budget of a couple of £100 a year to get your bike serviced is really the only other running cost. Sooner or later, you'll need to replace the battery, and that will cost hundreds of pounds, but look after it and your battery should last for many years. Whatever you're switching from, you're going to end up saving money in the long run. So that's our beginner's guide to e-bikes. Hopefully that will have answered some of your questions, but if you have anything to ask we haven't covered, pop a comment below and we'll help you if we can. And if you found this useful, pop a like on it and subscribe to see more. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.